All right, great. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Wildfire Preparedness Community Meeting for 2021. My name is Laura Palmer-Lohan, the Mayor of the City of San Carlos, and it's an honor to be here with you all this evening. I'd like to welcome you to generate discussion and promote community engagement regardless of the circumstances, and we appreciate your flexibility in joining us this evening. We know the pandemic has cast a little bit of a gray cloud on us, but we'll move forward nonetheless. I'd like to also introduce staff. Ray Iverson, Fire Chief. Jake Trickett, Administrative Sergeant with the Sheriff's Office is here. Christina Bell, our San Carlos Police Chief. Tara Peterson, the Assistant City Manager. Stephen Machida, Public Works Director. Adam Lokar, Management Analyst with the City Manager's Office. Brian Carey, Management Analyst with Communications Coordinator. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to inform the community about wildfire threats, emergency preparedness, and available resources. We offer these meetings annually, along with our evacuation drills, to help prepare our community. San Carlos, like many other communities, is not immune to wildfire threat. It is important to discuss emergency preparedness to make sure our community is ready for these events. We appreciate you taking an active interest in educating yourself about this issue. The meeting will be recorded for the benefit of the community members who could not attend this evening and will be posted to the city website, along with a FAQ document compiling common questions that are asked this evening. So it will provide a resource for you in future. I would like to thank the fire and police chief who have provided and are still providing aid to those experiencing wildfires in our state. I extend our sincere gratitude for their efforts in keeping our and other communities safe. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to the presentation and Q&A session to follow. I will now turn it over to our Fire Chief, Ray Iverson, to begin the presentation. Thank you. Welcome, Ray.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Juan. Thank you all for joining our Community Wildfire Preparedness Forum. This evening, we'll be discussing how you can be prepared for wildfires in your community. If you need assistance, you can see there's a Q&A button you can click on to ask questions. If you need assistance, there's a Q&A, click on there for questions. Next slide. You may type your questions into the Q&A box. Additional questions can also be sent to citymanagersancarlos.org, and it will be answered on our website of frequently asked questions. As we begin our presentation, we're reminded of a picture here of Crest View Park, which shows some of the wildfire preparedness efforts that happened this year in 2021. Next slide. Wildfire preparedness is a topic of great interest to many of you. In light of the recent fire activity we're experiencing throughout the state of California, wildfire preparedness is a front of mind for many. During this discussion, we'll be talking about various topics. One being wildfire conditions, wildfire emergency response, homeowner vegetation reduction, education and communication, city parks vegetation reduction, evacuations, and alert wildfire cameras. Next slide. In 2020, wildfire activity was very evident in our community. We experienced a major fire event called the CZU August Lightning Complex, which burned over 85,509 acres in San Mateo County. In San Mateo County, specifically, it burned 10 to 12,000 acres. This incident took place over 2 counties, San Mateo County as well as Santa Clara County, for a total of 85,509 acres. In San Mateo County alone, over 54 structures were destroyed. A couple other statistics regarding that incident. We also are aware that there was over 1,500 structures total lost between the 2 counties. Here in San Carlos, we sent resources to that incident out of Station 12, Engine 12 and Engine 512 as part of the initial attack on that incident. We also sent many resources and staff for overhead assignments. Next slide. Some of the activities that we were able to do over the last couple of years, including this year, is really take a look at our city parks and lands. And for example, in 2019, we were able to clear and clean 48 acres. As you notice, in 2020, that almost doubled to the fact that we were able to clear and clean over 82 acres. And from the map on the slide, you can see the areas that were covered, that were cleaned and cleared, highlighted on the map below. Next slide. Vegetation reduction, we can see some of the efforts. I'm sure you're all aware of the goats who have been very active in the community, really clearing the parks and the areas around Crestview Park and many others throughout San Carlos. They've been very active and very helpful in reducing the risk of wildfire through vegetation management, and they work for free. Vegetation reduction. Annual activities throughout the years have been going on for annual activities that we've been conducting our vegetation reduction plans. Every year since 2016, the council has approved funding for vegetation reduction and management. Fortunately, we were successfully awarded a FEMA grant in 2018 for additional wildfire mitigation. And we've been working to fulfill that grant by employing Cruz and also goats to work to clear vegetation on an annual basis. As mentioned at the very onset, we talked about Crestview Park. Also, these work activities include Big Canyon Park, Highlands Park, and Eaton Park. However, with these activities, through the grant funding, through the crews that have been out there, through the goats, there's also homeowners actions that we want to recognize. As you can see the slideshow below, there are many efforts our homeowners have done to really harden their structures and make their community safe, making sure there's the defensible space around their homes, as evident by these pictures and illustrated below. State activity has been increasing over the years. It seems like our season has been getting longer and longer as the years have gone by. This graphic depicts areas in which we can see from 1973 to 1982, the season was 42 days. As we see the area get longer as 83 to 1992, that season was 24 days. And then we can see that season, fire season getting longer and longer and longer to the point now where we're in 2021, we're considering the season as being pretty much all year round with very little breaks regarding the loss of fire and impacts of the wildfire season. Next slide. Here's a map that really shows how the drought has impacted our state and our region. If you have a chance, go back and look at last year's map from July 2020. And that last year's map, the areas dictated or indicated there were some yellows, beige, meaning there were some areas that were abnormally dry or moderately drought, to the point now where our state is pretty much red, almost all the way red, which indicates extreme drought in the state of California. And as you can see in the peninsula around the San Francisco Bay Area, we are experiencing extreme drought conditions. And to the north of that, to the north of us, we are experiencing an exceptionally drought area. And there's no doubt that the comparison with this map and the recent fire activity, the drought has definitely impacted our fire seasons, and our predictive services are very clear. As we can see from the fires that are burning in the state now, they're burning predominantly in those areas that are experiencing extreme drought conditions. Next slide. We're calling this the new normal. Although it's not normal, we don't expect this to be a normal course of action. Year after year is proven to be a very continuous situation with increased temperatures, intense wind events. This depiction to your right on this slide shows the coffee pot fire near Santa Rosa that burned in a particular area that we may believe to be a defensible area that's well manicured and well maintained. But due to the nature and the destruction factor of these fire conditions that we're experiencing now, this fire moved really quickly through these areas and well-populated areas. and really causing the fire season based on this change in vegetation and these conditions. This behavior is not normal, but it is kind of being our new normal. So we'll talk about other ways in which we can prevent this and maintain that. But this is what we're seeing throughout the state of California. Next slide. So response. This is one method of dealing with wildfire threats. This is our last resort method in which we respond to these incidents throughout the state of California. We also respond locally. We have local fire resources as depicted in the illustration above with Engine 16, which was out of Station 16 in San Carlos. We use those resources for local fire threats in our local area. We also have mutual threat zones, what we call a state responsibility area. Basically, anything north of the Alameda de los Pueblos is what we call a state responsibility threat zone. So along with local resources like our local fire engines and firefighters, we'll also have state resources come in and respond. And they'll bring in the illustrated pictures there like you see, the Type 3 engines, the four-wheel drive engines, the aircraft, helicopters, air tankers with retardant. We also have incident command and control structure that's come in to help with overhead. We work with our law enforcement partners and our Office of Emergency Services, now deemed the Department of Emergency Management with the county. And we work with our region within our local regional area to have a single point ordering for mutual aid resources. And we live in an area we dictated called Region 2, and that covers our portion of California where we request these resources. We have common communications. We're fortunate to have our Public Safety Communications Center, which we have those light communications to request resources. And these things ramp up based on incident complexity. Whereas maybe we have a small amount of resources going to a smaller fire, but if there's something happened in the threat zone, we'll send a massive amount of resources to be able to control the fire early before it gets to a conflagration or something that's out of control. Next slide. Here's a little breakdown of the incident command system. Some people have known this to be called SIMS or NIMS, but SIMS stands for Standard Emergency Management System, and NIMS stands for National Incident Management System. Now, this is something that we use in California, have been using in California for many years. ICS or Incident Command System gives a command and control structure to allow for able to control the amount of resources needed on these large scale incidents. And we use this on an everyday basis in the fire service and with our law enforcement partners on local incidents we may have. We have a command and control structure that allows us to be able to manage these incidents, and it's scalable based on the intensity or the need to expand these components. We're able to expand or use what we need to based on the complexity of that incident. Education and communications is also important. Similar to what we're doing today, we like to be out in the community and engage with the community with public communications and education to really show that we all have a part in preventing wildfires, preparing the community to be ready, to be set, and to go when needed. Informing our community when red flag warnings exist. We will see those in the news. We will see alerts come out regarding red flag conditions that are sustainable or right for extreme fire behavior. We have alerting community through our Smc Alert network, and which you can sign up for to be alerted when a fire breaks out in your area. Make sure you have signed up for Smc Alert at www.smcalert.info. Now we'll have a video to talk to you about how you can be prepared in the event of a wildfire.
Wildfire exploded early Thursday morning, burning nearly 25,000 acres.
The fire has forced new evacuations this morning.
The fire moved up a ridgeline and then caught the Santa Ana winds perfectly.
In the summer of 2008, nearly 2,000 lightning-spark wildfires scorched over 1 million acres across California, destroying hundreds of structures and impacting the lives in the surrounding communities forever.
I never thought it was going to happen to me. You know, you always figure it's the other guy that's going to get their house burned.
And with California's Mediterranean climate, another fire siege of that magnitude is just a matter of time. I'm CAL FIRE's Daniel Berlant. Devastating wildfires occur every year across the state, putting lives, property, and the state's natural resources at a constant threat. In California, wildfires aren't a question of if, but only a question of when. If you choose to live near a natural area of the state, you are at risk for wildfires, and it's your responsibility to prepare yourself, your family, and your home. And that preparation starts with 3 simple steps. Ready, set, go. Getting ready before wildfire happens is a vital first step in protecting yourself and your property. Beginning in the spring months, well before the peak of fire season, you should carefully assess your property and start taking steps to prepare for the hotter months to come.
As firefighters are responding to fires throughout California, one of the most important things they can look for is defensible space.
Defensible space is the required 100 feet between your property and the surrounding wildland area. Defensible space has consistently been shown to be the best, most practical first line of defense for your home against wildfires. Adequate defensible space provides a barrier to slow, or in some cases, even halt the progress of fire that would otherwise engulf your property. It also helps ensure the safety of firefighters while they defend your home.
I'm going to have to go to homes that provide some type of clearance for my firefighters. I cannot go to a home that needs has brush and everything growing right up to it. I've got to pick a home where I can safely make a stand, and if we get stuck there, that we can survive it as well.
When the destructive lightning siege fires burned throughout California in 2008, defensible space once again proved to be a key element around the homes that survived, while many homes without adequate clearance were not as fortunate. But defensible space isn't the only factor in protecting your property. Another critical step is hardening your home. During a wildfire, loose flying embers can find weak points on the outside of your home. Hardening your home means reinforcing these vulnerabilities. Cal Fire Battalion Chief Nick Schuler demonstrates some of the components of a well-defended home.
As you see here, they have an excellent green belt around their home. All of their trees are limbed up, so there's no dead and dying vegetation around their home. And as you can see, as we walk along, all the leaf litter has been picked up, and we move straight into the fire-resistant construction. They have the stucco siding, they have the enclosed eaves, and the composite roof. All proactive steps that this homeowner has taken to reduce fire potential.
Now that you have your home ready for a wildfire, it's time to get set by preparing your most valuable assets, your life and the lives of your family. You should start by creating a wildfire action plan. A wildfire action plan gives you and your family a chance to plan out and write down important information and special preparations that you'll need to take as a wildfire approaches.
As part of your wildfire action plan, you want to sit down with your family and talk about things like escape routes, what roads are you going to take when you leave the house, and the other thing is where are you going to go. You want to have a meeting location.
Your family's plan will be unique depending on your circumstances, so it's vital that you practice and update it regularly to keep everybody prepared. It's also important to plan which belongings in your house you'll need to take with you in case of evacuation if you have time.
Prepare what you're going to take with you when you leave. There's nothing worse than packing up to leave and you realize you didn't take anything that you really wanted to. You took stuff that just was the first thing you saw.
Wildfires can move quickly and can change direction into a surrounding community without warning. With the assurance that your home is now well defended and your family's wildfire action plan in place, when a wildfire approaches, you're now ready to go. During a wildfire, emergency personnel may not be able to warn everybody, so it's up to you to take the initiative to stay informed by listening to the TV or radio for announcements. If an evacuation is imminent, it's time to set your wildfire action plan into motion. Don't wait to be ordered to leave your residence. Just go, and go early. By leaving early, you give your family the best chance of surviving a wildfire.
Follow the directions of fire and law enforcement, and if you feel threatened, you need to go ahead and get out of that home. We have a lot to notify you of that, but you have to be willing to get out and get out early.
Although wildfires can be unpredictable, destructive, and deadly, they're an undeniable part of California's wildland. Wildfire is coming, and it's the steps you take now that will ensure you, your family, and your home have a fighting chance when it happens. For more information on how to prepare for wildfires and for a wildfire action plan checklist, visit readyforwildfire.org.
Massive wildfire
Next, we'll turn the meeting over to Sergeant Jacob Trickett with the Santa Carlos Police Bureau.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for attending or zooming in tonight on this. For some of you, this may not be anything too new. However, it's a good reminder on a basic safety message. A few things I want to highlight before I start talking about evacuation preparedness. Our county works extremely well collaboratively between not only law enforcement, emergency medical services, and firefighters, but also the various cities throughout this county. It's, in my opinion, second to none throughout the state. I've had the opportunity and experience to be deployed to a few fires for law enforcement mutual aid. One was just last year in our own county, as Chief mentioned earlier, the CZU complex fire that did affect and impact part of our coast in San Mateo County. During that initial response on the first night, we had to respond with another sergeant, 20 deputies, and begin mandatory emergency evacuations within the first hour. Just last week, I was deployed again to the Dixie Fire. I've been up there twice in the last few weeks and helped with security patrols and also evacuations. We assisted staff from the Sheriff's Office and other agencies within this county, assisted with emergency evacuations in Lassen County as well, just outside of Susanville. On both of those types of evacuations that I've participated in the last year, the fire was within a half mile or a mile of a residential area. So I just want to highlight that when we talk about planning for evacuations, it's very, very simple to have a starting point, which is just having a discussion and having that dialogue inside of your own home. Maybe expand on that with your friends and other family members and even your neighbors. Just having that discussion is a good starting point and gives you something to think about of how you want to start putting things in motion and just planning and staging certain basic supplies or an emergency kit. And we'll talk about that a little more later. So when it actually comes time for an evacuation warning, that's basically a good indicator. You need to be ready. There's a few different ways of being warned and receiving an order. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. An evacuation order, that's a mandatory order that is being given to help preserve life. That's our goal. In both of the evacuations in the last year I participated in, they were very brief contacts with citizens. Please don't take this the wrong way if you ever find yourself in this situation. Our contact may be very brief, and that's not meant to be rude or dismiss you. It's just we may have quite a bit of area to cover with only a limited number of law enforcement personnel to help give this notice. Where we were was very rural, and cell phone reception wasn't as great as we'd like it to be, so it did require door-to-door action. Most people we encountered were either in the process of evacuating or getting ready to. Some people wanted to have discussions, and again, we couldn't have that opportunity to really give more information than we'd like. And so we would direct them to the local agency's website for more information when time allowed, and they weren't in immediate danger. There were some members of the public that did inform us that they wanted to stay. That's well within their right, and your right. We would give them, though, the admonition, depending on what was going to happen, help may not be able to come their way. I want that to sink in. And it's not because we don't want to, it's because we may not be able to. Like I said, in some incidents, the fires can move pretty quick. They're unpredictable. Having a plan really gets you in the mindset and think about what your options are, because when the time comes, if it comes, that's not the time to try to figure things out or work through it. So I ask you, we ask you, please start with a discussion and see where that leads you. Now, as far as alerting, there are various ways in our county that we can alert the public. Smc Alert. Smc Alert is a great feature to have and resource, and it doesn't take much. Anybody with a cell phone or email can register, and the chief gave that information earlier. It'll be available later on, and it's also on the city's website on how you can register for Smc Alert. That allows us to send out messaging not only for evacuation orders, but other things such as traffic hazards or other safety or hazard events in the county. If possible, during an emergency, reverse 911 and cell phone calls may be utilized to notify the public. That can sometimes take a little bit more time. SMC Alert, I've sent that alert out from the field using a mobile device or the computer inside my patrol car. While door-to-door is very basic, we know it's effective. However, it can be very time-consuming. And during an initial emergency order, we may not have as many resources as we'd like. But again, fortunately, with the sheriff's office being in town, we're the largest agency in the county. At any given time, there's usually over 20 to 30 deputies on patrol throughout the county. In addition to that, you have other law enforcement agencies in the county. And if we ask for help, we're going to help each other. But that will, again, take time. Those door-to-door contacts, they're going to be brief. TV, radio, again, you're probably going to see that a little bit later if it's possible. But we're going to try above door-to-door with reverse 911 and SMC alerts. Social media may be another form of communication to relay those messages of both warnings and an evacuation order. There are some considerations when you start thinking about planning an evacuation. First, we want to talk about some of our vulnerable population who may have some mobility limitations. This is where it's really important to start thinking about what would you do and how could you get help to leave the disaster or evacuation area. Travel routes, this is one of the questions that we commonly get. I want to know an evacuation route. What way am I going to go in the event of a fire? We wish we could tell you. If we're talking about tsunamis, we can give you a pretty good idea of where to go. With fires, there's so many factors that make it unpredictable. And we've seen that with various fires in the history of the state of California. Fires move depending on wind and fuel. We can't always make those predictions. Refuge areas, those are going to come, those are going to follow, but those are usually hours into the event, and we may not be able to readily give that to you during an evacuation right then and there, but it is going to come. Next slide, please. So what you're seeing now is a screenshot of a system that the County of San Mateo has adopted called Zone Haven. We're one of the first in the state to have this system. I can tell you between the city of San Carlos, the Redwood City Fire Department, San Carlos Fire Department, and the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office, along with the San Mateo County Department of Emergency Services, worked on the system very early on. In fact, San Carlos is one of the first cities to have quite a bit of data contributed between fire, the city, and also law enforcement. What this does, it allows us and aids us during an emergency and evacuation to identify zones and recognize what may be the most risk, and we need to focus on evacuation first. As you can see, we have a snapshot of an estimate of number of structures, population, even vehicles. Why is that important? It gives us an idea of how many resources as law enforcement I may want to direct to assist with an evacuation. The chief mentioned earlier that under a unified command, law enforcement, fire, medical, and even other departments such as public works are going to come together when possible and start working together to work towards the overall public safety conclusion. Again, preservation of life. So again, this gives you an idea of the different zones. Thank you. Here's another snapshot. What we have here, this gives us a quick view of certain things in the school that may be important for us for an evacuation, such as high density housing, hospitals, schools, things of that nature. Next slide, please. So right here, this is an example of an emergency kit that every household could easily put together. And it doesn't take a lot of time, doesn't take a lot of resources. You can start with something simple like an old box or preferably an old school bag, gym bag, something that's easy to grab and take with you. What we recommend is pack the bag ahead of time. Make this a family event. You need something to do on a Wednesday night or Thursday night and preoccupy some time with the family. It's a good opportunity to have this discussion on what the plan is and what you can do and what's important when it's time to leave the house if you need to. If you can back up all important files, we recommend using an encrypted device or drive. That way it's a little bit more secure should you need to leave. And if your bag is ever compromised or if it's stolen, you would have a little bit more security in that. We recommend you don't leave these bags or boxes in your vehicle at all times unless it's away from plain view and sight, because we don't want to create a crime of opportunity where somebody might take that from your car while sitting in the car. We recommend any necessary medications that you or your family or friends may require. Try to keep that on hand and just be aware of the expiration for that and other items inside your kit. You can, a little bit of cash and credit cards. It's good to have on hand because you never know when you might need it right off the bat. If you have a spare cell phone, at least a charger or even a mobile battery bank, it's good to have. Again, food and water, pay attention to the expiration dates. You don't need a whole lot, but maybe enough for a day. Flashlight with batteries, it's good to check that every once in a while. Seasonal clothing, toiletries, and some sort of face covering like an N95 mask. Now, we're not saying to go out there and stockpile all those masks, we know we need them right now, but it's also very important to be able to breathe when there's a lot of ash in the air and make sure that you can safely drive the evacuation area. Other face coverings will work in a pinch as well. Again, it's important to make sure that when you're having the planning discussion, you consider what you'd want to put in this kit and make sure you maintain it. And again, another family exercise you could do is check this every quarter and make sure everything's ready to go. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Sergeant Trickett. Next, we'll talk a little bit about some of the technology that has been made available in the recent years. One of these new technologies that we'll be able to use for wildfire preparedness and notification have to do with alert wildfire cameras. These are largely a multi-county system covering the entire western United States. These cameras have been installed in partnership with PG&E and municipalities. We have cameras located within San Mateo County. There are 5 located within San Mateo County currently. There are dots on this map here below that show where these cameras are located. And there's a push to continue to locate these cameras throughout our communities to assist with wildfire alerting and wildfire notifications. Next slide. Here's a perfect example of a notification camera that happens to reside in Redwood City at the top of the water tank. This camera is depicting a fire that happened a couple weeks ago at the intersection of Whipple and Veterans Road, the gas station fire, Valero, behind Valero gas station there. This fire was able to detect that fire and the smoke using AI, which is called actionable intelligence, and pinpoint and triangulate where that fire was occurring. So this is a new technology that we're happy to have, and it has very well sweeping applications. These cameras are able to pivot, rotate 360 degrees, zoom in, provide high definition resolution, and really will be instrumental in the future with early warning and notification of fires in our communities. Next slide. A little bit about the power public safety shutoffs by PG&E. This is something that we have a smaller impact in San Carlos, yet it's still important to know that these may affect our community through power safety shutoffs based on conditions, based on weather, based on conditions that PG&E may deem necessary to discontinue power. So to get information on this, you can also look to the PG&E's website, but there's also supplemental efforts that the City of San Carlos has to look and notify you about PSPS, public safety power shutoffs. You can visit the website at www.cityofsancarlos.org, PSPS. Also, you'll find a community guide, information about zero power communications, and community resource centers if there would be the need to have those installed throughout our community, where you can go for resources and an event of a power shutoff. Next slide. For additional information, we have other links, and I'll pause here so you can take a screenshot or take a picture or write down these links that may be beneficial to provide information. For additional information that may have not been covered or provided, or you can refer to at a later date. Wildfire Preparedness Resources, cityofsancarlos.org, wildfire, of course, the PG&E PSPS information for power safety shutdowns, and the City of San Carlos website and resources there also for PSPS, power safety, public safety, power shutoffs. And then a couple other items to look at for reference. It would be the Zone Haven website for information on evacuations and how to get more familiar with the Zone Haven tool. And lastly, the Alert Wildfire cameras. Alertwildfire.org is a website you can go to find out and actually see real-time footage from these cameras that are located throughout our community. Now we'll have to answer any questions you may have. There's a few questions here in the prepared regarding wildfire preparedness. Some of the questions that have been listed here, I'll start with the first one. What are the most basic steps a family can take to prepare for a possible fire evacuation? Well, the most basic steps are first to get ready, have your home prepared to deal with the threat of a wildfire. Secondly, be prepared, have your go bag or your evacuation items close by, like Sergeant Trickett mentioned. Be prepared to have those items readily available for a quick evacuation. And third, act early. If you see smoke or fire, you may have evacuation warning or evacuation alert, but then you have to also look at the conditions around you and respond early. Next question will be, how do we get timely notification of an evacuation order? And we covered this earlier as well. We also want to remind you again to log in and register for Smc Alert .info. Make sure you're signed up for that to receive notifications in the event of a wildfire or any other natural disaster or emergency. How much notice and how long do we have to evacuate once the order is given? Well, if there's an evacuation order, just as Sergeant Trickett mentioned, we'd like you to leave immediately and to grab your go bag and go. So evacuation orders are meant to evacuate the location immediately. So we want you to leave in a timely manner as soon as possible. How can land around the home be prepared to reduce flammability? There again, there's resources that were mentioned, some of the links that we sent out and shared with you earlier in the previous page about how to create defensible space, the City of San Carlos Wildfire Preparedness links, as well as CAL FIRE. There are ways in which to harden your home, create your defensible space ahead of a fire, reducing the opportunity for flammable materials, and your home will be more safe for it. Lastly, please discuss how to deal with pine trees that have grown within 10 feet of a house. So we encourage you all, your ability to prepare your home ahead of a fire, to make sure your trees are properly limbed up, at least 4 feet off the ground, making sure you check with your landscaper or your tree trimmer or a local arborist to ensure your tree branches and your limbs are not too close to your home, making sure they're far away. That's how we want to be prepared for those situations. Now, some of you have already posted questions in the chat, the Q&A. You still have questions, you feel free to add questions to the Q&A box. If you have questions you may think of later, you are welcome to contact the fire department at the number provided, 650-780-7400, and you can talk to someone and ask those questions, and someone will be able to assist you further. And lastly, we have our Wildfire Preparedness Frequently Asked Questions that you can go to www.cityofsancarlos.org/wildfire. There you can ask questions and find out frequently asked questions that public have already asked.
Okay, this is Tara Peterson, Assistant City Manager. What I'll be doing now is reading the questions so that Chief Iverson and Sergeant Trickett, as well as our Public Works Director, Stephen Machida, can answer for you. So the first question, I believe, is for Chief Iverson. What does clearing and cleaning entail? It was something you mentioned early in the presentation. What does that mean?
Cleaning and clearing entails making sure your balconies, your decks, your roofs are clear of debris, pine needles, leaf litter, anything that may be considered flammable or combustible. Making sure your vents are sealed with vents that are not intrusive, that allow for embers or sparks to go into. If you are possible, make sure your walls and fencing are non-combustible, to make sure there's no leaf litter or branches or trees against your fences, to make sure those are clear. making sure your windows and your doors are clear of debris and leaf litter or anything that may be deemed combustible or flammable.
Thank you. The next question, I believe, is for Stephen Machida. How were priorities set for use of the vegetation reduction funding budget?
So, you know, we're fortunate we're able to receive some grant funding. However, and so most of that funding actually went to, you know, some of the efforts that we kind of showed in the chief's presentation earlier, where we would actually use goats, we use hand crews, and we really identified those areas that we felt were most susceptible to any type of wildfire. So in general, they were mainly focused on a lot of the open space, our parks, Eaton, Big Canyon parks. And so that was the kind of the main focus over these past 2 years. As the chief had indicated, you know, we started a little bit smaller in 2019, and then 2020, we almost doubled this area. And as we move along each year, we anticipate probably doing more and more, just because we do have a little bit more experience. But basically, the focus really has been on those open spaces that we feel that are most susceptible to, you know, fires.
Thank you very much. The next question is, I'm very concerned that the old Black Mountain water property on Alameda between Madera and Melendres, excuse me, this is extremely dry area and a fire hazard. What action can the city take to protect that area? Not sure who that would go to. You guys can pick.
So
go ahead, Chief.
I was going to start with, first of all, making notification. We posted the number there for those to call. If you have areas such as that are concerned to you, feel free to give the fire department a call at the number there below on the slide, 650-780-7400. And we're happy to have an inspector or code enforcement person go out there and make sure we make those conditions safe.
And I guess, you know, in addition to, because Black Mountain is really kind of private property, we'd have to really work closely with the owner there to kind of assist in some of the fire mitigation or brush mitigation, you know, on their property.
Thank you. The next question, I believe, would be for Chief Iverson. How often should you update the food in an emergency bag? Where do you recommend it's kept? And it might be heavy with all the items in it. So any solutions on how to handle any of that?
Well, that's a great question. One of the things that people often do is rotate those food supplies on a regular schedule versus annually or every 2 years based on the expiration date of the product. Every product has different expiration dates. There are kits out there you can buy to have a 25-year life span. I don't know if I'd want to eat that one, but if you can rotate that on a regular basis, once a year or once every, based on the expiration date, that's recommended, including water. Water is something you want to rotate. It does not have an unended lifespan. If you have items that are heavy, I suggest you invest in some type of wheel cart or something with wheels. There's duffel bags and things you can put that have wheels that can help and assist you with moving those products around or taking it with you in event of emergency for evacuation purposes.
And where would you recommend that these products be kept?
Yeah, so those products should be kept in a cool, dry place, a place that has a sealed container, so you don't have to worry about any bugs or rodents getting into your food supply or animals. So something that's cool, dry, and secure, I recommend you put those items there.
Thank you. The next question, again, is for Chief Iverson. If we are viewing purpleair.com and a large area is in the 70s AQI, for example, but there are 1 or 2 adjacent stations in the middle with a 200 to 400 AQI and rising range, could that indicate a smoldering fire? And should that be called into 911?
Now, we get this quite a lot. It's a good question. Smoke investigations is one of the things we do when in doubt. We're fortunate to have some of these cameras coming in now. We can actually pinpoint the location to make sure there's a difference between active smoke or stagnant smoke. As we recall, last year during the fire seasons, we had a lot of active suspended smoke in the air. And those were as a result of fires happening many, many miles away from San Carlos. So when in doubt, we like to err on the side of caution, but really look at that smoke conditions and see if it's active first smoke versus stagnant smoke that's sitting there in the atmosphere. A good example is the smoke that we saw in the video with the panel 360 camera. There was an active smoke being produced from a fire. Definitely we want to call 911 when that occurs. But if there's smoke that's stagnant in the air and is covering the entire city, chances are that's an air quality issue. When we want to may call the non-emergency line for those inquiries if it's not an active fire.
Thank you. Another question for Chief Iverson. How do you create 30 feet of defensible space when your neighbor's house is only 10 feet away?
Well, that's a great question. And those guidelines are based on properties that have that much space. So if you look at the our website where Wildfire Preparedness frequently asked questions, there's also templates in there on how to create defensible space. And those are basically on zones. There's zone 1, 2, and 3. Zone 1 is 0 to 5 feet from your property or home. So every home has at least 5 feet separation. So those are the zones you can control. Zone 2 deals with 5 to 30 feet from your home. So you can basically use those zones as your template and guide to set that defensible space based on the available space you have between the structures.
Thank you. This might be a question, I think, for Jake. I have an elderly relative who lives elsewhere in the county. Can I receive notifications for her area as well?
Great question. I believe you can actually during the SMC sign up process that you can select what cities or even unincorporated areas of the county you would like to receive notifications for. And that's all part of the sign up. And I believe you can also manage that, your preferences moving forward. So again, if you go to the SMC Alert website, you can see all that and directions on how you would do that.
Very good, thank you. I believe this question is for Chief Iverson. How do you plan to evacuate the handicapped?
That's a great question, but our law enforcement partners are assisting for evacuations. We have resources that we have available to help with that. We carry resources on our ambulances and our fire engines to assist with moving patients or people who are not able to ambulate on their own. So they may need assistance. So it's important to really note that ahead of time. If you are a person who may need assistance, make that known ahead of time so that we know we have those people in the community that may need assistance. Part of our pre-fire planning or triaging of the situation, making that known. You have a person that maybe has a live-in condition where they're shut in or unable to ambulate on their own. Make sure you let us know ahead of time so we can flag that location and know that we need to assist those out of those environments. Nothing that's similar to what we do with care homes or assisted living facilities. Those are our target areas where we know we'll need to render special assistance to evacuate.
Thank you. Again, this is a question for Chief Iverson. If our yard has several large heritage oak trees, which in San Carlos are protected trees, what can we do to keep a safe, clear, dispensable space around the house?
That's a great question. And typically, as long as the trees are healthy, they have a lot of robust preventative methods to protect from wildfire. Making sure the tree is healthy and well watered, making sure the limbs are limbed up off the floor, off the ground, at least 4 feet off the ground, making sure there's no leaf litter or grassy or areas of light fuels there, grass, leaves, debris around those trees. A healthy tree is pretty robust with the threat of fire. It's when we have those other things that are contributing factors like drought or conditions with vegetation that cause those trees to be a danger.
Thank you. This next question might be for both Chief Iverson as well as Stephen Machida. Thank you for the answer to cleaning and clearing for residences. What does cleaning and clearing entail as it relates to what the city is doing in its parks?
So as I kind of mentioned earlier, some of the efforts that we actually took place earlier this year is to do a lot of hand crews. We did have some other equipment out there, but basically it's to kind of reduce kind of the grass and limbed up some of the trees, as Chief Iverson had indicated, where we limbed up the tree so none of the branches actually touched any of the floor. And just got rid of some of the leaves and grass and dead wood around, and kind of remove a lot of the underbrush in the parks.
Anything to add to that, Chief, or is that good?
That's good. Thank you.
Okay, great. The next question. We live in Devonshire Canyon, and in the wooded portion of the canyon, many owners are in denial with the condition of their property. What can we do? Who can we talk to get them to clean up their properties?
Well, I'll start off, Stephen, on that. It's a great question, and I think it's important that setting the example for our neighbors, making sure our properties are clear, goes a long way. And if there's concern with neighbors, neighbors helping neighbors is a great way to maybe educate. Education is the key with our neighbors and our community to make sure they understand what needs to be done, how to do it, and render assistance when needed. We really like to educate and show the importance of why their property needs to be cleared, and some of the outcomes that may happen if they don't. So I think that's something that as neighbors, as community members, we take that responsibility and help each other. I think that'll go a long way. And the last resort is an enforcement arm, which we could look at as far as inspection and enforcement, but we'd rather deal with the lowest level of impact, which is dealing with the communication and education. I'll let Stephen chime in on that as well.
Right. So, I mean, as the chief indicated, I mean, in many instances, we would probably want to reach out to the property owner that perhaps aren't maintaining their property as it would be necessary. And in some cases, as the chief alluded to, in some cases, maybe the property owner just may not be really able to perform the actual work, in which case, you know, we may have to be able to find ability. Either we might be able to work with some of the local agencies, Boy Scouts, you know, other service organizations that may be able to kind of assist in some of the cleanup of the yard, if that's, you know, if that's necessary. However, if that is not the case, and you know the individual prefers or refuses to actually clean up their yard, there might be other necessary measures, enforcement measures that we would probably have to take.
So how would, Stephen, to follow up on that, how would one let you know that there's a problem with a neighbor?
You know, usually because it's really on site, it would really need to go to our building department, who would, and then kind of make the assessment of, you know, how to approach the property owner.
And they can report it through maybe our Inform app?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next question is, I believe it might be one of the two of you again. Who is responsible for maintaining and clearing the land in Pulgus Ridge Park and the adjacent areas that lie between San Carlos Hills residences and routes 92 and 280? There's a growing number of barren trees and shrubs that are visible in those areas, which could potentially impact homes and escape routes for many.
So I believe Pulgus Ridge is just slightly, I mean, there are portions of it that are in San Carlos, but some of it's outside San Carlos, probably in the county area. In those areas, you know, but probably the best way is, you know, to contact either me or one of my staff, and we probably want to work together with the county to find out, you know, how to proceed about any type of cleanup or any issues that might be occurring within Pulgus Ridge.
And should they contact you via phone, email, Inform? What would you?
Email or phone, or even San Carlos Inform.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, do we have any recommended evacuation escape routes depending on which zone one resides in? I think this is a Jake question.
Thank you. That's another good question. And just to recap from earlier, it can be difficult to pre-plan evacuation routes that we would have on file for a wildfire. As mentioned, fires are often unpredictable from a few factors that can be the fuel, such as brush and other debris, as well as winds. An example, the Dixie Fire, we've seen the fire jump quite a bit up there, and it's very difficult to forecast. That's why we recommend and encourage our residents to get to know their neighborhood, get to know different routes to and from their home. We notice that sometimes we get complacent. I'll admit it, I've done it myself. And it's very easy to not know which streets are around you or outside your normal route because we're set in our ways. Again, this could be another family outing or exercise to just drive around, know different areas. That may not be a major thoroughfare, but it may be a good point of ingress or egress to get out of an evacuation area. It's a good idea to know the names of streets if you can. Again, a lot of people don't know the names of streets that they drive every day. That's okay, that's understandable. But around your neighborhood, it may be beneficial, especially if you are given some instruction that certain roads are closed. It's good to know that ahead of time. So unfortunately, we're not able to really give predefined routes. That's something that you just need to be aware of and know multiple ways to and from your home.
Thank you, Jake. The next question is for Chief Iverson. How do you make sure you have enough insurance on your home? It seems like many people find they are underinsured after a fire loss.
I think that's a good question. I think one of the things you may want to do is reach out to your insurance agent to make sure that you're covered properly. That is something that I recommend everyone do, whether it's fire, flood, or earthquake insurance, or whatever insurance you may have for threat of risk. Your insurance agent will be the best resource for that.
And I think this next question is basically the same, but I will ask it in case you have any nuanced answer. Is it possible to get homes rechecked for fire risk classification for insurance purposes?
This other question that's related to that first question, that is something that the insurance companies will do to risk assess. They use the state fire risk assessment maps, which is published by the state of California. And I think that is something that they use to evaluate these properties to identify the risk factors for insurance ratings. So that is something you can request through your insurance company to work with the state or the risk assessment maps. I think your insurance broker would be the best, of course, resource for that as well.
Thank you. Another question regarding maintenance of neighbors' property. Are there any recommendations for addressing neighbors who have dead plants and grass around their property? And please, can the city approach the owners of the Black Mountain property to have them clean it? The fire there would impact and potentially spread to many of us.
In regards to the Black Mountain, certainly that is something we could approach the owners to have them address whatever debris or fuel that might exist on the property. So I'll note that in my to-do list. In regards to approaching property owners that may have dead or brush that may need to be addressed, you know, certainly if that is something that we would know about and we see this as a you know, a concern, you know, certainly we will have or contact the property owners, but in many instances, you know, we just don't, we may not know. And so if it is something that, you know, the public sees kind of an issue, that it would be good to kind of either report it either to the city, to, you know, to either me or, you know, via San Carlos Inform, and just kind of let us know about it, because I think many instances there are more eyes out in the public, and we can't be everywhere in the community to see all the items or issues that might be out there. So it would be helpful if you know, if you so see fit to kind of let us know.
And they can also contact the building department, correct? Because we do have standards that people have to maintain, or they're out of compliance. Is that
Yes,
correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. The next question, we periodically see helicopters surveying the area near Crestview and Edgewood roads and their adjacent canyonlands. Are they part of the smoke surveillance effort, or do they have some other purpose you can tell us about?
So that's a good question. I don't think they're part of the smoke surveillance effort, but there are people who do inspections such as PG&E for their power lines. Those areas are most predominantly owned by the SFPUC, the San Francisco Public Utilities, and they have their own inspections of their facilities and infrastructure that may be part of their program. So, but as far as the smoke surveillance effort, that's not their purpose to my knowledge.
Thank you. The next question I can answer is a question on what is Inform. So this is San Carlos Inform. It's an app where you can report anything to the city, whether it be a pothole or a down power line, although that would go to PG&E, but you'd still let us know about it because we'd certainly want to send out crews to assist with road closures, et cetera. But you can go to the App Store and download. Again, it's San Carlos Inform. And it's a very helpful tool for you to let us know what's happening. Of course, you're always welcome to go to the website and inform us through that of any concerns that you have, either by emailing us or by picking up the phone and calling us. Anything to add to that, Stephen?
No, that's right. Pretty much on point.
Okay. For the chief. What about the evacuation? Oh, okay, no, this will be for Jake. I apologize. What about the evacuation route across the Crestview Hallmark route because of the Belmont barrier? Not sure what the question is exactly, but there is the barrier. Can you address that?
So I know that that was a discussion that was occurring between the city of San Carlos and Belmont staff. I believe it's still in discussion. That's one of the things that we are trying to resolve as far as maintaining that entrance, as far as access to that entrance. Ultimately, we do recognize that is a point that could be accessible. It's just identifying, again, how would be the best way to manage and secure that. So it's not something that is easily used for day-to-day use. So that's something that I would say keep an eye out in the near future for a little more information on that, on how we plan on using that.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what department at City Hall do you go to discuss a request for a neighbor to clean up at their home? Again, we mentioned that that would either be through Public Works, but ideally it would be through the building department, as they have the community compliance officer staffed in their department. And they will address any kind of issue that doesn't meet community standards. Again, the Inform app can also, you don't have to think about where it's going to go. You can just indicate the problem and it'll go to the correct party through that app. Thank you for that question. The last question I have is, would the gate at the end of Pebble Drive be unlocked and opened as an evacuation route if needed? Fire trucks open and use the gate, but not resident cars. Is that the same Belmont?
No, I believe that's a different gate. If I'm understand it correctly, there is a kind of unfortunately it's a private gate at the end of Pebble that I don't believe we as Public Works have the ability to open that gate because it's not really a public access gate, if you will. So Jake, do you have any information on that gate?
Yes, sir, maybe a little bit. I do believe it is a privately maintained gate. I do believe that fire has had access in the past. I have seen that gate open one time in 14 years. That area does also, it's adjacent to unincorporated San Mateo County, the Palomar Park area. So it is a little bit not desirable for access, but I do believe fire, or at least has had access in the past.
Okay, and that is all of the questions that we have this evening. As we mentioned before, we will be providing this information on our website in a few days, probably the end of next week, with the video from tonight's meeting, as well as the question and answers that we've taken this evening. I want to thank everyone who was interested in attending this event, which we can plan to continue to hold annually. just to keep people informed and to make sure they understand that we are on top of this and we're continuing to provide the information and the resources that we can to the community to ensure they're safe. Is there any last words that you'd like to give us, Chief Iverson?
Just want to say thank you all for tuning in to this important webinar this evening. And if you have questions in the future, we left our contacts, and continue to make sure everyone stays safe and work with our community to keep San Carlos as safe as possible. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. And you, of course, can reach out to the city anytime if you have additional questions that you didn't think of this evening. Thanks again for attending. Good night.